Welcome to the Behind the Shield podcast. My name's James Gearing, and this is episode 184. And I was absolutely honored to have on the show Bas Rutten. Now, Bas, as many of you know, is a legend in the world of MMA, but also is yet another extremely humble, nice person that I see over and over again with these incredibly successful guests that I have on the show. And in his life story, you're going to hear so many incredible chapters from his childhood, how he got into martial arts, how he and his friends dealt with the bullies that they had, his MMA career, his injuries. But we also talk about the O2 trainer. I wanted to revisit this in the intro for a moment. Bas was extremely generous and sent both myself and my son an O2 trainer, and it's early days yet. We just started using it, and I will post some more updates on my social media, but I can absolutely see why this works. As he mentions, creating the correct posture and the correct muscles to breathe when you're doing the exercises absolutely carries through. And my son, who has bronchospasms, I'm hoping that's going to just reinforce the improvement he's already made. So for all you guys listening, this isn't a paid commercial, but I just always testify when someone sends me something great. Make sure you do check out his O2 trainer after you listen to this interview. Highly worth it, very inexpensive, and it's not something that's got to be strapped to your face during exercise or you suddenly revert to in the middle of a crisis. This is something just like our, foundation training, our movement practice, our good nutrition that is going to contribute to better overall health. So with that all being said, as I always say, please go to your podcast apps, rate the show, share the show. It's you, the listener, that helps grow this project. And my ultimate goal, as you hear me say many times, is to get this to every ear hole that can understand, at least, on the planet, because every single one of these episodes has gold nuggets of information that will change people's lives. So with that being said, I introduce to you Bas Rutten. Enjoy. Bas, I want to say firstly, thank you so much for agreeing to come on the podcast.
You're very welcome.
So where are we finding you today on planet Earth?
Right now I'm in California, in Ventura County, and it's cold here in the morning, but the sun is shining again. I'm very happy because there was a lot of mudslides, a lot of rain, a lot of everything, but I think it's over now, and now it's only a straight sun. So
excellent. Glad to hear. All right, well, you were not born in California, were you? So where were you born?
In the Netherlands.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, if you wouldn't mind, because I always like to explore people's early lives, because a lot of times it shows, why they became who they became. What did your parents do, and how many siblings did you have?
I have an older brother. He's only 2 years older. He's a lawyer. And then my mom and dad both. My mom just turned 82. My dad 85. Both still alive, thankfully. So that's good. My mother was just a housewife, taking care of the kids and taking care of me because I was a very sick kid when I was young. And my dad was a bookkeeper for this for a company close to where we used to live. So
okay.
Yep.
So neither of them were professional cage fighters or anything like that?
No, my father was a really good track athlete. And from his side of the family, everybody did track. I used to do track and field as well.
Gotcha. All right. Well, you mentioned about being sick. So I think that's a very important part of your story. So if you wouldn't mind telling people listening, what kind of sickness you had and how it affected your life.
First, when I was 4 years old, I contracted rheumatic fever, and I spent like 4 months in the hospital for that. And then we moved when I was 6 years from a big city, when I was 6 years old, to a smaller village, and somehow I contracted asthma and eczema. And for a lot of people who have asthma or eczema, it goes hand in hand together. So I would, if my eczema would be very prominent on my arms and in my hands and in my face, my neck, then my asthma would be better. And if I would have had asthma, then my skin disease would be better. So it goes back and forth. I used to, I think, an insane amount. I thought it was 15 pills 3 times a day. So I took 45 pills a day. That was just for my eczema and for my, and there was a lot of cortisones. Later on, that probably made my career short, because I developed tendonitis, and we found out now that that's from the cortisones, of course. But I had also asthma attacks. So I had asthma all the time, need the inhaler all the time. And then every 6 weeks or so, I would be a week or 8 days in bed, not able to eat because I simply couldn't breathe. That, of course, especially the skin disease, well, you get bullied a lot because kids don't understand it. They call you a leper, all these kind of names, and you get pushed out, so to say. So and bullied a lot. So when I was 12 years old, we were on a holiday in France, and we sneaked into a movie, Enter the Dragon, from Bruce Lee, which was 17 years and older. But my brother and I found a way to sneak in, and we saw Bruce Lee, and I realized that if I would become like Bruce Lee, then I could handle my bullies, and it probably would stop. So asked my parents, took a long time, 2 years, to convince them to do martial arts. Finally, I started doing martial arts. I was taken under the wing of an adult. He brought me to Taekwondo class. So I was training as a 14-year-old kid with the adults. And from there, just things went really fast. Like within months, I was dropping the adults with back kicks to the body, high kicks, everything. And I overheard them talking about me in the dressing room. So my confidence started coming back, because, if you always been told that you're nobody, nothing, then, you have no confidence. But slowly but surely, my confidence started rising. And then I got into a fight with the biggest bully in my school, pretty much also in town. And I knocked him out. It was just they challenged me to a punch, to punch him, which I obliged. And I realized it was, bullies weren't strong at all. I mean, it was one shot, his nose was broke, and he was knocked out on the ground. All his friends who were around him, because they were surrounding me with like 6 guys, nobody had the cojones to step in. So I guess they were all afraid of him as well. If you can't beat him, join them. But that was it. 95% of the bullying stopped. The downside was that the police was alarmed, since he had to go to the hospital for his broken nose. And that meant, of course, they came to my mom and dad, and they immediately took me off for martial arts. But now I had the taste. Now I went to libraries. I started reading books about Bruce Lee, videotapes. We would just watch everything that we could find. And we just started training ourselves. Me and 2 other friends of mine who also got bullied. One had a big head, and the other guy was overweight. But what happened was, once we started training, the guy with the big head got a growth spurt. And so suddenly, proportion-wise, everything was normal, because he became this big guy. And the guy who was overweight, he started losing a lot of weight. He started boxing, competing in boxing. And then I would just train with him illegally in his class. And my parents wouldn't know, in the boxing classes. And we went after all the bullies. We made a list with all the guys who had bullied us in the past. And we went to, had a checklist, and we just went after everybody. And we got them all. Now one we didn't have, but that was okay. He was afraid anyway, so we didn't do anything there. But I'm pretty sure that's where my love for fighting comes from. I realized that I was actually good at it. So when I was 20, I left the house, my mom and dad's house, and that was immediately when I started doing Taekwondo again. Also Shintai karate, or some form of karate with some little throws here and there, but nothing like mixed martial arts as nowadays. I immediately started Thai boxing also, because I wanted to compete. I wanted to compete full contact. Won a whole bunch of fights, all by knockout. I just pretty much destroyed everybody. Then it was hard for me to get fights at that moment. So, I took a break from it, because I would train for 6 weeks, and then my opponent would see it was me, because there was not internet at the time. There was no internet. So they would realize it was me when I would arrive at the show, and they didn't want to fight. So then I would train for nothing. So that happened like 2 or 3 times. I said, I'm going to stop. I became a bouncer. Not the smartest thing to do, because, in Holland, that's, the nightclubs, they close at 5 a.m. And then it's time for the bouncers to go out and party, So it's not the healthiest and cleanest lifestyle, of course. And then on one of these shows on New Year's Eve, when we were out, apparently I said yes to a Thai boxing match against the guy who was training in prison. Frank Lotman was a really good striker, undefeated, a lot of like 95% knockout rate. And they called me I believe in February. They asked me where to send the posters to, and I asked, what poster? He says, from the fight. I said, who's fighting? He says, you. I said, I'm fighting. Who am I fighting? He says, Frank Lotman. I said, the animal? That was his nickname. And they go, yeah. I said, when did I say that? He said, well, on New Year's Eve. And I started thinking back, and I realized, yeah, I did talk to the promoter, so I said it. So now I'm going to have to own up to it. And I said, when is the fight? He said, 2.5 weeks. So I had 2.5 weeks to train after 2 years of being a bouncer and not having trained one single minute since that time. So I remember I couldn't do the 20-minute rope skipping. That's how out of shape I was. Needless to say, lost the fight, and then the audience spit me out. It was really weird because I knocked everybody out before, but then I lost the fight, and suddenly I was the worst fighter there was. So I didn't want to fight for the Dutch people anymore, because if they were that ungrateful, why would I want to fight for an audience like that? And I started doing these martial arts shows with my taekwondo teacher. They had these high choreographed fight scenes that we would do. We would go to, for instance, to a nightclub, and at midnight, the music goes down, and suddenly this high-paced music came up. And then we would come up in our spandex and pump muscles with sticks, long sticks, nunchucks. We did everything. Now we had these complete fight scenes, choreographed fight scenes, and break tests, and with this cool stuff. I would kick him in the gut, and he would grab me, throw me backwards. I make a somersault backwards, like Bruce Lee did in Enter the Dragon. That's where we got it from. And that show became suddenly a hit. We started doing it for TV, for Dutch TV, and then it became European TV. We started traveling through Europe, and we started doing shows at big events. And on one of these shows, Chris Dolman, who's the owner from Rings, the organization Rings in Japan, but he's located in Amsterdam. He stopped me after the show was done, and he said, "Hey, Bas, I remember you from Thai boxing, man, and you were such an incredible, explosive fighter. And now I see you doing all these backflips and somersaults and all that crazy stuff. I mean, I think you have. It would be good for you to go to try free fighting. That's what they called it at the time." So he explained to me what free fighting was. And told me that there would be a pay, would be a paycheck attached to it. So I said, sign me up. I would love to do that. So I went to his class, trained, got destroyed. I remember, because I thought I was a good kickboxer, but, I didn't have any ground experience. So these guys just ripped me apart. And it was actually so bad that I had to park my car next to the road coming back from Amsterdam to where I live. It's like a 2-hour drive. And I called my wife. I said, listen, I'm sleeping in the car. I'm completely destroyed. And she was laughing because she said, "Oh, so that's it for you?" I said, "No, that's not it." I said, "Within 6 months, I'll be back there, and I will tap everybody. You watch what's going to happen now." And that was where my love for it started. But I got an injury here, injury there. One day he called me, and I never picked up my phone. That was so weird that my answering machine was broke, but somehow something forced me to pick up the phone. And he told me, "Hey, Bas, there's 2 Japanese guys here, Minoru Suzuki and Funaki Masakatsu. Those were 2 guys who started a new organization called Pancrase in Japan, and they're looking for talent." So I went over to his gym. He says, "Come to the gym right now." Jumped in the car, took the 2-hour drive, got in a scuffle with one of the Rings champions because they wanted to videotape us sparring. And the Rings champion started to put it really hard on me. So I told him, I said, "Hey, listen, we don't have to go hard. They just want to show technique, see technique." And I think that he thought I was afraid, so he turned it up. And then I told him again to stop. I said, "Listen, it's okay. I'm not saying this for me. I'm actually saying this for you. If you want to go hard, I'll go hard back. So whatever you want to do." And of course, now it was on. And but it was short. I high kicked him in the face, knocked out. Needed a whole bunch of stitches next to his eye. And that's where I saw Funaki and Suzuki pointing at me. That was it. And I think 2 months later, in September 93, was my first fight. The 21st, over to Japan. Won that fight by knockout, 43 seconds. Next day, people start bowing to me on the street. It was very weird. You come in a foreign country and suddenly people recognize you. And then what I realized is that I was on the cover of a newspaper on a picture. So after my fight, I was so excited. It was only 43 seconds that I jumped in the splits, something that I always used to do for fun with my buddies. I jumped in the splits to every corner to the audience. And one of those pictures was in the newspaper. You saw me hanging in the air and my opponent knocked out below me. And that's how the people recognized me on the street. And that's why, 1 in 10 people suddenly started bowing. So fight 2 came, fight 3 came. Lost that fight by submission. Then I won a few more fights by knockout. Then I lost another one by submission. And then when I finally lost my 3rd fight by submission, I became very angry with myself because I said, listen, if you want to be a champion in this sport, you're going to have to learn the ground game. So I started to become very vocal, went to every gym, asked if somebody wanted to train with me, but apparently nobody wanted, until I found this one guy, 20-year-old, or 19, I think he was at the time, Leon Van Dyke, super strong guy, super strong kickboxer, very in tune with his body, picked up things fast, and we just started rolling 2-3 times a day, watching videotapes, watching fights, see if we can make submissions better, create different setups for submission, and we got obsessed with it. But, like anything else in life, if you force yourself, if you work hard for it, everything starts working. I won my next 8 fights by submission, suddenly, and then I never lost a fight anymore. So at the end of my career, I went unbeaten for 22 fights, but it's all because I just put the dedication, the work in to become better on the ground. So I always tell my students, if I can do it, you can do it. Sure, I got talent, but I don't have crazy talent. There's guys out there that have way more talent. So if I can do it, you can do it. And if you have to work harder for it, that's even better for you because you're going to be stronger. Because now you have to work really hard for it. It's going to be, you don't want to give it away. Guys with less talent, they're the hardest guys to beat because they had to work much harder than you in order to get to the spot where they are. So guys like that don't want to give it up. And those are the real tough guys. And that was pretty much it. Fought in Japan, became the world champion there, defended the title 2 more times. The UFC matchmaker came to Japan since I beat already a few UFC champions in Japan. And John Peretti was the matchmaker at the time. And he told me after I knocked another guy out, hey, we want to have you in the UFC. How many fights you have left? I said, I'll get 3 more fights on this contract. And that was it. In 97, I moved to America. Fought my 3 more fights in Japan from here. And then I went to the UFC, became the UFC Heavyweight Champion. And unfortunately had to retire because of injuries, which I already had in Japan. And I kind of wanted to stop. But once the UFC came, I always wanted to come up with the UFC theme song. That was my wish. And that was my biggest motivator to go to the UFC. The really cool UFC song that they had at the beginning. It's like a video game. Bum, 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 bum. That thing.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so cool. I want to come up with that song. So I went to the UFC and thankfully everything worked out. But then, once I became the champion, I sustained another injury. And then it was time for me to stop fighting. And that's the end of the fighting career. And then I started jumping into TV, movies, and commentating.
Yeah, well, I want to go back to something you said, and that was an awesome lead into where you are, currently. But the bullying. So when you first had that bully and you struck him in the face, physically, were you much bigger by that point, or was it just the training that had helped you in that one moment?
Yeah, that was just the training. I was just still weak, because I still had the asthma, and that will prevent you from growing, so to say. I believe around 18, when my asthma starts slowly fading away a little bit, it became less. I had two attacks a year instead of every 6 weeks. Then my body started to pack on more muscle. That's when I started doing power training as well. And track and field. I was very good at track and field. I wanted to become the next Bruce Jenner, believe it or not. He was the gold. I was decathlon. That was my thing. And of course, the running was always the worst for me. The 1,500 meters was hard because of my asthma, of course. But for the rest, I was hard on my way. I had a really high jump, good long jumps, javelin, shot put, discus. Everything was good. It was just the running that was less.
Right. Because it's interesting you say that when you hit that one that the other bullying or most of the other bullying stopped. I had a similar thing when I was young and wasn't even as dramatic as yours. I just literally participated in a competition, taekwondo as well, in my town. So I made the paper, won gold, and nothing, no self-defense element to it at all, just the sport ITF taekwondo. But just by being in the paper, a bunch of guys that were bullying me at the time, or, having issues because I was dating one of their ex-girlfriends, immediately stopped. And they went from, ganging up on me in a club to like, hey, brother, how you doing? Nothing had changed, just the illusion of being, a badass. And I wasn't even that, it's so funny how once you learn how to fight, that in itself is such a great deterrent for a lot of bullies.
Yeah, you find out that they're really not tough guys. And, when you look back on it, you know why. And they gang up with a group of guys against a weak kid. Think about that. It's pretty pathetic what they're doing. They're not going after the biggest jock in town, in school, of the restaurant or whatever it is. No, they pick the weak kid out and then have to gang up with a group. So, if you would have thought smart when you were a kid, you would have known that these guys are sissies, because that's why they do it with a group and pick out the weak kid. But, as a kid, you don't realize that. You think just that the whole world hates you and they want to come after you. So, yeah, once you knock somebody out or they hear that you can fight, like with me also, before even I started doing Taekwondo, everybody thought I was a black belt. That the whole story went around my town because I was imitating Bruce Lee. I could literally, if somebody wanted to fight with me, I would put my foot like Bruce Lee would do in a side kick, right, in front of his face, and I would hold it still. And I didn't have to hold my leg like a lot of guys do. I just put it up and I put it in his face. They say, "You sure you want to fight, dude?" And then they were, no. They were immediately they were intimidated just by me lifting his foot to his face. I mean, it's stupidity, but it worked really well. So I embraced it. No more fighting.
Yeah, it's amazing how many lives Bruce Lee must have touched, because I was a skinny little English farm boy, so I didn't even have any schools around me really to go to when I was younger. But I had Tao Jeet Kune Do and all of his books, and had a Wing Chun dummy in one of the stables and a punch bag in another stable. But I mean, again, that seeing that small stature man being able to do what he did, I think inspired so many, just smaller men and women that weren't born with those gifts where they physically can intimidate most people that are around them.
And you talked about it, the Tao of Jeet Kune Do. If you look in that book, you will find every single submission pretty much that we do in MMA. Like people go toe holds, heel hooks, inverted heel hooks, knee bars. Everything is in that freaking book. I mean, he was way ahead of his time because he knew if it was going to be taken down, he needed to adjust. One of my biggest highlights in my career was I had this show on TV, Inside MMA. We had for 9 years a weekly live TV show about mixed martial arts. And I was very fortunate to interview his daughter, Shannon Lee. And she allowed me to sit behind his desk. So she showed me where the hidden compartments were in his desk, and I had to go through his notebooks. It was so cool to read the things, what he would do. Like one day he would say 1,000 one-finger punches, 1,000 kicks, 1,000 sit-ups. Everything was 1,000 with him. He was a firm believer. You know what he always says? I'm not afraid of the guy who knows 10,000 kicks. I'm afraid of the guy who knows one kick, but who trained it 10,000 times. Because that's the dangerous guy. Another example I always use is with Mazoyama, the Kyokushin guy. I started doing Kyokushin later as well, the full contact karate. And Mazoyama, the founder of Kyokushin, was known to knock out bulls with his punch. That's how hard that guy hit. And I remember in an interview, they asked him one day that if there was anything that he could make stronger in his fighting, in the skills that he had, he said, what would it be? And he said, my punch. And that was the first thing he said. And he was already knocking out bulls, but he still thought it was not strong enough. You see, I like mindsets like that. It's never good. And that's what I always thought with fighting. I always thought my opponent was training harder than me, so that will push me to train even harder. And it was never enough. You're never there. There's always room for improvement. And once you have a mindset like that, wow, you can lift mountains and you go through everything.
Yeah. And I agree 100%. And we talk about this a lot on the show when it comes to our professions, whether it's police, fire, military, that same mindset. And obviously it pertains more to the police and the military, because they literally have people that are out there trying to kill them. And for us in the fire service, it's more the inability to get to the top of the building, to make it through the fire, to whatever it is. But every single day, as you said, I mean, especially for us, we have such a diverse group of skills that we have to try and master. If we don't take it seriously every single day, God forbid there might be a time where we go on a rescue and we're not able to save the person, and we know in our hearts it's because we didn't train hard enough.
It really is. That is it. You guys are running toward the dangers instead of away from it, and that's another thing you have to train. That's nice and dandy when you're training, right, to becoming a fireman. But once the first fire happens, I'm pretty sure there's a bunch of nerves, because now it's real. Now there's no room for mistakes. Now it's not in a controlled environment. Anything can happen. Backdraft, whatever it is, anything can happen, and it can kill you. So I'm pretty sure that your first big fire job was pretty nerve-wracking.
Yeah, and clumsy too. You think it's going to be this beautiful orchestrated, scene where you just go through the door and you extend the hose, and it's not. It's a whole bunch of people tripping over each other, falling over, pulling ceiling on their head. It's quite comical when you see a real fire.
Yep, exactly.
All right. Well, another thing that you mentioned about going from Taekwondo to Muay Thai, did you have was it a rough transition initially? Because I remember doing exactly that. And going from Muay Thai to boxing and just getting my ass handed to me and realizing how poor my hand skills were compared to my kicking.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, 100%. I got dropped with a liver shot the first training. That's where my love for the liver shot comes from, because my hands were low. It's same as with you. You come from Taekwondo and there's no punches to the face. Also in karate, there is, but nobody does it. There's a lot of kicking. So my hands were lower. They were next to my body pretty much, or my hips. So I was training against an A-class fighter, which is a professional guy in Holland. And he very fast realized that. So what he did, he just hit me in the face. And what happens if you have your hands next to your hips and they hit you in the face, you overcommit. You bring your hands up really fast in order to block that punch. But by doing so, you overdo it. You expose the body. And needless to say, he gave me a simple 1-2 and a liver shot. And Bas went down, and I never had an experience like that. Not with a kick, not with anything. I've been kicked to the body. I was a tough guy. I beat everybody up in my gym because nobody could handle me. But man, that first Thai boxing class, it was exactly like you. I got dropped immediately, and I go, okay. But you know what? This is another thing. I had a girlfriend at the time, and I remember we lived across the gym there. I came home because my hands were not high at my jaw. And I spent 4 hours in front of the mirror punching with my hands to my jaw. And I'm saying 4 hours. Like you don't realize. I challenge you to do it 30 minutes. See if you can make 30 minutes. I did 4 hours. I'm very obsessive compulsive. If something is wrong with me, it needs to be fixed right now. But the next day when I went back to the gym, I cleaned out 80% of that gym. And they actually thought I played a trick on them. They thought that I already knew how to box and that I was just acting like I couldn't box. And I came back the next day and then just put the hurt on everybody. I said, no, I spent 4 hours in front of a mirror because my hands were not going to drop anymore. And they go, you spent 4 hours in front of a mirror? I said, yeah, it's the only way to get good. You got to do it till you don't do it anymore. That's it.
Yeah. Now how much did you... How brave were you in the gym to be able to make mistakes and then learn from them?
In the beginning, a workout for me would be ruined because I was always really fast and had good head movement. So it would be ruined if somebody would hit me once. I would go home, I'm devastated. Somebody could hit me once, and it took a while for me to overcome that, because then suddenly I realized, wait a minute. Everybody's getting hit. Everybody, this is part of the game. It's how hard you get hit and you deal with it and you come back and, but somehow to me that was a loss if somebody could touch me. And once I steered away from that, that I said, I actually started letting myself get hit in the beginning. Not hard, of course. And I would go with the punches so there was not a full impact, but just to get over that anxiety. And then I would start sparring. And that's when I really started putting things together. That made me much better.
All right. Now, I've seen obviously lots of your fights. I watched you on Inside MMA as well. But one thing that I get, and I know you mentioned, Mike Tyson, you mentioned Ramon Dekkers as well, is just the ferocity that you strike with, and it sticks out, even though I've been exposed to fighters my whole life. So compared to great fighters, you, Tyson, Dekkers, there's a whole different level of just explosive violence with your techniques. Where did that come from?
Well, just that. Bruce Lee, controlled anger, bursts, do everything powerful. I never believed in jabs and setting things up. I'm a big believer now, don't get me wrong. But at the time when I was fighting, I go like, why if I jab... Okay, if somebody would give me a double jab in my face, I'll take it, and I trade you for an overhand for a right straight. So why would I do that? If I square up my stance like Tyson did, and like Ramon Dekkers, a more square stance, now suddenly you don't have a jab anymore, because now you can rotate your upper body, and then still if you push off on the back foot, now you have a straight punch. instead of a jab. Now, a straight punch, you have to block. You can't eat those because it will knock you out. So my concept has always been very simple. If I hit you really freaking hard in the head, your body will open up, and that's my next target. If I hit you really hard in the body, well, your head is going to open up, and that's my next target. So that's pretty much how I always fought. And I like to be a counter fighter. I know a lot of fighters make mistakes. When they kick, they bring a hand down. All those kind of things. When they give you a left hook, your right hand is maybe on their hips. I detect that right away from the beginning. It's the first thing I look at. And once I see the patterns coming, I start capitalizing on it. I start throwing the fake one. I let him block it, and boom, there's my knockout. So I like the game of breaking it down and figuring out your opponent and then capitalize on it.
When you were training back then, I've seen a kind of evolution in the way people view it sparring with the shoot box. You remember Vanderlei Silva's gym? They opened up a gym in LA I don't even know if it was a year, but I was a part of that. And it literally ended up being like Fight Club. It was just full contact. You were fighting people way, way bigger than you. And then you're talking about learning to get hit. That was definitely my trial by fire. But I also had, I was deaf in my ear and had headaches and all kinds of other stuff too. What have you seen as far as levels of sparring through your career, and which is your favorite kind of amount of impact for preparing people for a fight?
Well, we go hard. We have when we have training sessions at our gym would have, and people who would come and watch, they would never want to train with us because we'll go pretty hard. I'll kick hard to the legs, kick hard to the body, hit you hard in the body, the face, of course. I'm not going to knock you out. So if I see that I'm going to connect, I redirect or I hold back. And then it's all about having great sparring partners. If you have a great sparring partner who has that control as well, well, you almost never get injured. But for the people who are watching, it looks like really hard. Now, we didn't do it like what is a shoot box did, but because they would pack themselves up, right? They put a body gear on, they put all that gear on, and they would just go full contact. I think it's stupid to go to the head really hard. I think that's what you see with boxers. They spar so many rounds before a fight. That's why they have the CTE. It doesn't come from the fights. It's always from the training. They get hit in training. So yeah, I like it, but there needs to be a part of control. If I'm dazed, I don't like somebody to knock me out. Now it never happened, but still, if I know I dazed somebody in training, I'm not going to go for the knockout blow. Now for the body, yeah, if I can drop you with the body, because people go with liver shots. I said it yesterday here. We had Conor McGregor's training here at my gym now also, and he, we were talking. One of his students was there, and he said, how many people you think you dropped? I said, in training? Oh man, we're talking hundreds. And he go, but a lot of them are the same guys, of course. But I said every workout, 3-4 guys would go, and we spar twice a day. So not like people now spar once a week. No, we have a whole training session. At the end, we always spar. And we do that twice a day because sparring is what you're going to do in a fight. And that's why we focus a lot on that. I think it's very important to test your skills like that. So over the years, I've been training hundreds, but thousands of times. Yeah, I've been dropping a lot of people in totality if you put everything together. So for the body, yes, I will hunt. But yeah, for the legs or something, for instance, I wouldn't give you really hard low kicks because that you're going to carry on to the fight, and that's of course not good. And the head, of course, we always take care of the head.
Yeah, brilliant. Now, speaking of sparring and training, have you trained law enforcement or military?
Oh, a lot. I do a lot. Homeland Security, Elite Special Forces, military. I train a bunch of these people.
Okay. And what does that look like? Because I know that we had, obviously in martial arts, it was very striking based, unless you were a judoka pretty much. And then we got into the jiu-jitsu, which is definitely seemed to be very popular these days. But I've seen, a lot of stuff going on now where people are so sport jiu-jitsu focused, they forget the street application or the multiple attacker application, which the core jiu-jitsu addresses, but if you're just constantly pulling guard and spinning around, you're going to get punched in the face if it's outside the competition. So what's the kind of philosophy that you use for those kind of tactical athletes that you train?
Well, you always want to be prepared for any scenario, of course. People say you can be the best wrestler on the planet. It doesn't matter if you're fighting on the street, you're backing up and you trip on a curb. You're going to be on the ground. You're going to be on your back. And if you don't know how to defend yourself on the back, you're going to have a problem. So always be prepared. for something that might happen, and most of the time that's your weakness. That's like with me. My weakness was submission, so I made it my strength. If you look at my record, I actually won more fights by submission than I did by knockout. So I went in as a striker, but I came out as a submission guy. So it's just making sure that they say, oh yeah, I will never go to the ground anyway. I say, you don't. There's nothing that you can control. There's no control for that. You can trip, like I said. You can simply fall on the ground. Now you're on the ground. And if you don't know how to defend yourself. So we work on everything. But of course, if they like the striking, we do that. But the smart guys, like the elite special forces, they already do that. And their trainers, their coaches, normally, unfortunately, a lot of them, I don't think have any business being there, because the stuff they teach is just like very simple, basic self-defense stuff that doesn't work, because those guys are not the world champions jiu-jitsu. Those guys who would just see a thing and then they think they understand it, and that's how they teach it to their students, so that's stupidity. But if you train with a really good jiu-jitsu guy, then you're going to find out what really real jiu-jitsu is. And it's the same with strikers. And those elite special forces, they knew that. So yes, they have to do those classes with those guys that the military gives them. But then on the side, they go to people like me, who actually fought for a living and who know that everything what you do is to stop somebody. But that's on their own time. They do that fighting and that jiu-jitsu, they do that on their own time. There are no jiu-jitsu classes in the military. There are, but they schedule those. It's not the military doing it.
Right. Now, what's your philosophy on people in law enforcement? Obviously, some come to you, so they're being progressive. As a whole, do you see that there's a lack of that kind of training in the law enforcement community?
Oh yeah, for sure. There needs to be way more training. I think what governments around the world should do, because the cops, they always get spit out, but these people, they do 95% good, but people only focus on the 5% that goes wrong, But if you have a cop who wants to kill somebody with a rear naked choke by accident, it's because he doesn't know he doesn't understand the technique. He doesn't know. He did it maybe a few times, but he does it the wrong way. If you have a blood choke, like when I was a bouncer, if there would be a guy who was drunk and he wanted to fight, I'm not going to beat his face in. I'm going to choke him out, And if you do it with a nice blood choke, it's the most humane way to get rid of somebody. You put him on his side so he doesn't swallow his tongue. You make sure nothing happens, and you tie him up and you call the cops, and then the cops are going to come. So, but if you do it wrong, yeah, you can break somebody's neck or maybe his throat. You damage his throat, and then you can actually kill the person. So, what the governments around the world should do is pay the cops to train. That's what I always said. Pay them for the time that they go to a gym and force them to go to the gym. So now it's part of their job to go to the gym and to understand those techniques. Because trust me, a lot of them are gaining weight because they're sitting all day long in the car, and they don't really focus anymore on anything else. Because let me face it, you get the tasers, you get the guns, but that's a very dangerous thing, because sometimes there is a hand in hand. Yeah, sure. Like military, I talk to elite special forces, and they say, well, if it comes to hand to hand, that means that everything they did was wrong before, because it should never come to that point. But guess what? It's good to be prepared for it, because it might happen. It's always good to be prepared and know it than not to be prepared and then don't know it when it happens. You see what I mean?
No, absolutely. Now, speaking of striking, that's something I meant to ask you before. So Pancrase was palm strikes only, was that right?
Yes. To the head, but to the body, close fist.
Okay, so when people are striking on the street, when it is a self-defense situation, are you an advocate of open hand strikes or punches?
Open hands. I used to do that as a bouncer before I went to Pancrase, because I saw my partners, my bouncer friends. If you fight 3-4 guys, if there's big melee going on, and you're fighting multiple guys, sometimes your aim is a little off because you're too busy. And I saw them hitting a skull and break their hands, and I go, that's not going to happen to me. So I start palm striking everybody and hitting them with the bone of my wrist on the back of the head. Like you loop around and then you hit behind the ear. And I found out really fast that is the sweet spot to knock somebody out. If you look at Mike Tyson, I don't know how he was able to do that. He was such an incredible athlete and a credible boxer, so accurate. But, he was always the smallest guy, but somehow watch him throw a left or a right hook on his opponent. He almost hits the back of the head, behind the ear. He stands that close because nobody's ready for impact for that. Everybody's ready for impact from the front and from the side, because that's where everybody attacks you. But if you attack to the back of the head, like just behind the ear, your body, the equilibrium is simply not ready for that. And that's where the knockouts come. That's why in Japan, when I start knocking people out, they go, how is he doing that? Well, they hit with the open hand. I never hit with the hand. I hit with my bone, with the wrist bone, and I hit behind the ear.
Gotcha. Brilliant. Well, that makes perfect sense to me. All right. So one more thing of the martial arts before we talk about the O2 trainer, which I really want to pick your brains on. But I saw that you trained in Krav Maga, and that's always a very interesting martial art to me, because in the States specifically, I've only been exposed to it since I've been here. You see the core Krav Maga, which seems to be very, very effective within, the Israeli special forces. But then you see almost like a franchise Krav Maga where, it's being trained by people that clearly do not seem to have much of a grasp of the art. So it seems to be a spectrum from very, very effective all the way through to very diluted. So what's your impression of the art, and how would you suggest people find a school that actually is teaching that core art?
Well, I would suggest to take here in America Krav Maga worldwide, and then still, it's all about the coaches who are there. Now, I'm very fortunate. I got introduced to a fan of mine in the beginning, Amir Perez, and Amir Perez is really he could be the best guy there is, and he's that good. I mean, he was 21 years old when he was a Navy SEAL instructor in Israel, so that's by itself says something. And when he found out I was in America, I saw him at a nightclub, and he goes, "Oh man," with his brother. And he goes, "Oh man, you boss, what are you doing here?" I say, "I live here now." I say, "You live here? Are you teaching?" I say, "Yeah, I'm teaching Tuesdays and Thursdays at the Beverly Hills Jiu-Jitsu Club." He says, "Oh, can I come and check the class out?" I said, "Of course." So he came over, and he watched the class, and after class he told me, "Can I show you what I do?" And I said, "Sure." And he pulled out a plastic knife from his bag, and I look at him and I say, "You know what? Don't worry about it." And he says, "What do you mean?" I said, "I don't need to see it." He says, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, been there, done that, man. There's so much bad stuff out there, and there's such a stupid defense. It's like hitting the knife out of the hand, and now it's a fight for the knife. It's like, there's no control." And he looks at me, and my whole class is there, and he says, "Okay, let me do something else," he said. And he walked to his bag, and he pulled out a pellet gun, and he loaded the pellet gun, and he gave me the pellet gun, and he says, "Why don't you shoot me if you see me move?" And I said, "Excuse me." He goes, "Well, only when you see me move." He said, "Just put the gun on me, and if you see me move, you're allowed to shoot me." So now the whole class, everybody was intrigued. And I think I did it 6 times, and I was not able to do it. I got hit, and he has my gun, and we're talking about less than a second. And I mean less than a second. I put this guy up for fight science. Like, I did a lot of stuff for fight science, like kicking crash test dummies, hitting bags, and they measured the impact. And they wanted me to do street fighting and weapons. And once they started with the weapons, I said, "Listen, I'm good, but you got to see my buddy. You got to take him for this episode because he's a freak. That you're going to freak out." He took the gun away in 200ths of a second. They measured it. It was faster than the brain can react. You'll be hit. If there is a point that he grabs the gun, he hits you in the face. He stops just before. And when he's disarming the gun, at the moment he's disarming, you see the bullet come out. That's when they react. That's how fast it goes. And then he has your gun. And I go like, how is this even possible? And then I start doing the knife defenses and everything with him. Yeah, that's a whole different level. That's all about control. And that's, but this is a guy who was a Navy SEAL instructor in Israel, which is, well, they have the best army. That country is under attack 24/7 pretty much, right? So it's all about where you find the best coaches. But Krav Maga Worldwide is a very good organization here in America. Still, I tell the people, Google about it. Google about it, what other people say. There need to be coaches who are open to talk to you, discuss things, and change the little thing here and there. Because let's face it, every technique, yeah, it will work, but some techniques don't work for me. Like, for instance, when I start doing submissions, there was a lot of mistakes that I saw people make. Like a figure 4 armbar, a chicken wing, as they call it. Well, everybody escapes a chicken wing because they hold the arm in a 90-degree angle. And yeah, there will be a lot of pressure on your shoulder, but guess what? Now they can stretch their arm. So I figured out, wait a minute, if I put the hand on his back, so I make sure that the back of his hand touches the back of his back, he cannot stretch his arm. So I start modifying those submissions. But the reason I could do that is because I never had a coach. If you go to a class where your coach told you to do it that way, and that coach, his coach told it to do it that way, I mean, it's a lineage going on, but they've been doing it wrong. Nowadays, everything needs to be more tight, more effective. And there was a whole bunch of things that I thought, wait, I can make this better. And if at least make it better fit for me, for my body type. And then we start going into it like crazy. Wait a minute, if I escape this, then I can right away into a counterattack. And that's when we started getting creative. Okay, now I'm sitting mount, I go for a straight armbar. Everybody knows that attack. Okay, so what can I do in order to disguise that? Find a different way to go to that straight armbar. And then I would do that. Then I would submit my training partner again, like 1 or 2 or 3 times. Most of the time, never more than 3 times, because he was a very smart guy as well, and I could not finish him anymore. So I was forced to create another way for a straight armbar from mount. And then I was forced to find another way. And then I start flipping those around. Now I have 4 ways. And I try number 1, number 4, number 3, number 4, number 1, boom, number 2 suddenly hits. You see what I mean? So I start going back and forth. And I started doing that with every single submission, or we started doing that with every single submission. Now you suddenly have 3, 4 different setups to every submission. You make your opponent crazy. You see, it's just the amount of work and just be different. And since I never had a coach as well, my style was just completely different. I rolled with really good guys, and they go, "My God, who taught you?" I said, "I taught myself." How is that even possible? But I have ways of exploding into submissions, different because I was never taught a certain way. But because it's different, it's highly effective. You see what I mean? Now, if I would roll with, let's say, a 3rd-degree black belt, there are some submissions that I came up with that I probably will catch him with. And now people go like, "Oh, no, but he's what?" No, I probably will catch him with those submissions because he'll never see them before. Now, don't get me wrong. It will never happen again, a good guy. I'll do it once, and that's it. It will never happen again. Now he actually can backfire it to me because that's how good they are. You see what I mean? But just being different and being different in the approach and being different in movement. Jiu-jitsu is a very slow game. Not anymore, but in the early days it was, especially with the gi. Everything is slow, holding the rappels, holding the sleeves, everything is methodical. That's not a fight. That's not a fight without a gi. I never understand those trainers in the beginning. The jiu-jitsu coaches said that if you did mixed martial arts, which is fighting without a gi, you still had to train with a gi. I said, that's such a waste of time because that's not what you're going to do in the cage. In the cage you train without a gi. That 4 hours that you wasted now, spend it on 4 hours training a week without the gi, because that's what you're going to do. You see, so it's always about the coaches. If they're open to evolution and to becoming better, like a Bruce Lee was, because he always said it's never ending. There's always adaptation, and that's with Krav Maga worldwide as well. I remember gun defenses, for instance, with Krav Maga worldwide. They did it a certain way, and suddenly it was changed. I go, why did you guys change it? I said, well, a guy in law enforcement, he did that particular defense. Because he did it such a way, he broke the finger of the guy, which wrapped around the gun, and he couldn't pull the gun out. So now they found a different way to do it, you see. So they see it, there's a mistake, they learn from it, they make sure that it will never happen again. And once you have coaches like that, then you have a really good coach. Unfortunately, though, they're hard to find.
Yeah, and you hit on a huge point as well, which was we're all different, and I think that's the thing that's lost in a system that's too rigid. If you teach it to Bas Rutten and you teach the same move to a 90-pound person, male or female, the application may not be the same. You may be able to muscle that technique to make it work, whereas the technique alone just may not work for someone because their body weight is so low.
That's exactly. And then you have the fast twitch fibers, you have the slow twitch fibers, you have the guys who are slower, but they can fight longer because they're like diesels. And then the other guys like me were very explosive, but we need a lot of stamina to feed those muscles with oxygen. You see, so you have to fight different again. You have to unload, relax. There needs to be a relaxation in between because otherwise you're simply going to run out of gas.
Yeah. Well, speaking of training, you have your O2 trainer, but before we get to that, I know you've had, fighting systems and other tools that you've put out there. How has your training, evolved from early in your fight days to where you are now, as far as the physical training?
Right now, I don't do. I had 4 neck surgeries. And the neck surgery actually happened in a fight scene for a TV show. So never had to do anything with fighting. Crunched my nerves. I lost 90% the power of my right arm at the time. It's now back to, like, I would say 45%, still less than half. But at least I can squeeze again. I can grab things again. I couldn't snap my fingers. Like snapping my fingers I couldn't do for 4 years. Couldn't brush my teeth because I couldn't put pressure on my teeth. That's how weak my arm was. So I had everything that I'm doing right now. It's all watching out for the next. So there's no more sparring. I didn't spar since 2006. That was my last fight. So I've been 13 years pretty much without sparring. Rolling I can because I have no cartilage on my kneecaps, which is the worst problem a knee can have because that's the only thing they can't fix. Everything else they can fix, but the kneecap is in constant motion. It's not like they take the kneecap out, they tape something on it, they can put it back. It doesn't work like that, and it's bold. Now, if I had little patches here and there of cartilage, then yes, you can do stem cells, and then you can culture stem cells, and then it will grow into the existing cartilage that is on your kneecap. But they're bold, so they have no way to attach cartilage to the kneecap. So if I start rolling, if I roll 20 minutes, 30 minutes, I'm going to pay for that for 5 days. I'm going to be in pain, sitting, standing, which I'm already in pain, but then it's extreme pain. My knees will blow up. So everything I'm doing right now, so it's just like a minute ago when I told you before, can we do it a little later? I went on this hike. Now, it's not a normal hike, of course, because I have this crazy hill next to my house, which is a crazy hill. And I went with the dog, but it's very steep. It's a high energy, and sometimes what I do, I bring simply a 10-pound weight, and while I'm walking, this is like a 45 minutes, an hour walk. I'm just working out my weak arm, constantly trying to spark the nerves to keep firing, and then hopefully it does something, and I'm going to get my muscle back. Because if you look at my biceps, for instance, my lower biceps on the right hand is completely gone. Now, my whole arm was like that. But slowly but surely from the top, it's going to come down now. But it's taking years. We're talking about it's 8 years ago, and I went from training starting with like 3 pounds, which I do now 20 pounds. But I can do this only one set, like 8 repetitions or 10 repetitions with 20 pounds. My other arm, I do 45 pounds, 30 repetitions. It's a big difference, And plus, if I did 8 repetitions or 10 repetitions, then the next time I can only do 5. That's how weak the arm is. I just constantly have to spark it. I got a Dyna ball in my car where there's the thing that you wind up in your hand and you have to keep it rolling. It goes like 6,000 or 9,000 RPMs in the middle of that ball. There's a little ball inside the ball. It's a really great thing that they invented for people with problems like this. And I'm using that in the car the whole time, just constantly sparking with light weights the nerves, make them fire, and then hopefully they come loose and they start firing like they did before. They didn't stop. They're not dead. So that's a good sign.
Right. And how did you deal with that mentally, going from being so, such an athletic phenom to having that challenge that literally, robbed you of your power and your use on that side? What was the mental self-talk like?
They're very destructive. That was very hard to deal with for me, because now suddenly I thought, what if a fight happens on the street? What if I had to defend? Somebody comes in my house. I couldn't pull the trigger from a gun because I didn't have the power to pull the trigger. That's how bad it was. So that's a mental crusher. You have to understand, I used to do 9 one-arm pull-ups. I would hang on one arm. I could pull myself up 9 times with one arm. And going from that, suddenly not able to brush your teeth or putting on your seatbelt or grabbing the milk out of the fridge, that's devastating for a guy. Any fighter would have the same thing, And what really got me out of it was, first of all, that I said, listen, I still have a hand. And then I saw Nick Newell. I don't know if you know Nick Newell. He's a fighter. He fights for the UFC also. He's born with he's congenital amputee, so he's born with half an arm. And this guy fights in the UFC now. He already has 2 belts from smaller organizations. This guy, let's say he has 14 fights, 12 finishes. He's not winning fights. He's stopping fighters. And once I met him with half an arm and I saw what he was able to do with half an arm, I had a good talk with myself. I go, dude, you're such a sissy. Look at this guy. He doesn't even have a hand. And he's not complaining. He's fighting through it. He signed up for wrestling in school when everybody was against him and he couldn't win. But guess what? He made it his strength, and now he's fighting. He won 2 titles for smaller organization. I get goosebumps right now when I'm talking. You see, those are guys I look up to very much. So once I realized that, and Nick also, I met him on the set of Here Comes the Boom when we were shooting the movie with Kevin James and Henry Winkler, Salma Hayek, and he was one of the extras, and he was there. And I remember he came to me and he told me to remember my name. He said, because I'm going to be a big name in fighting. And I look at him and I look at his arm and I said, and you mean this? Yeah. I said, but you have half an arm. And he says, yeah, but watch me. I go, dude, I love that, what you're saying right now. So I got his address. I sent him my workouts, my DVDs, everything that was fight related. I sent over to him. And freaking 3 years later, we have him on our show Inside MMA because he just won a title, And I go, dude, I remember you. You were there. You were telling me that you were going to do it, and you actually did it. You see, guys like that, very inspiring.
That's amazing. I had a couple people on. One was Carl Maynard, who was a quadruple congenital amputee, and he was the one that was a high school wrestler, and then he did MMA, I think, for a couple of fights. But yeah, no arms or legs, and still made it work. And then it was funny because he was saying initially he was losing, obviously getting tapped and rolled. But as he started winning, then and only then, people were like, "Oh, wait a second, but it's not fair because of the weight difference of his frame." And like, well, you didn't have any problem when he was losing.
I had the same thing. I had this one commentator when Nick Newell got somebody in a guillotine choke, and he has a really tight guillotine choke because he does it with a half arm that he can trap into the other arm. And then the commentator has the cojones to say, well, actually he has an advantage there. And I go, are you stupid? Dude, if it's his right arm and if I give somebody a left kick, he's going to have to decide what kick it's going to be. It's going to be a head kick or a middle kick. He can block only one side. So he has to read your body movement. I mean, it's way harder. He can't push you away. He can't hold you, grab you, pull you in. He doesn't have an arm, a hand. I mean, and you're saying it's an advantage?
Yeah, unfair.
Yeah, they don't get that.
There's another guy, Mark Almrod, who's a Royal Marine who got blown up with the IED and lost, one arm and two legs in an explosion. And now he's not only been in the Invictus Games and, rode in that and just on all these different events, running and rowing, but also now he does jiu-jitsu as well. And he just has that one single arm. And it wasn't like he was born with that as well. That's a big difference between these injured and the congenital, is that the congenital have had that since birth. So they're used to trying to do it, whatever. These soldiers or people that lose these limbs, they have to learn from scratch how to overcome this. So to watch him rolling with just a single arm that's so new to him is incredible as well.
Yeah, what was it? The drummer, was it Def Leppard, or what drummer was it who lost his arm in an accident?
It was Def Leppard, yes, in a coach accident.
And now he's drumming. You can't hear the difference. He's drumming with one arm. There's no way that you can detect that he has only one arm. It's, that's people for you, man. I always talk about this. There's such a crazy people. For instance, I train, I can't say what group it is, but it's Elite Special Force, the baddest guys there are, right? And we were one day, I overheard two of them talking about the next mountain that they were going to climb, because that was one of their hobbies, to take the Himalaya mountain or to take Mount Everest, all these mountains. And they were talking about a mountain that was pretty gnarly. And I said, how long does it take for you guys to get a mountain like that, to conquer that? He says, for us, 9 days. I said, what's normal? He says, 13 days. I go, wow, that's really fast. Now you do 4 days faster. And he goes, yeah, it's pretty good. But, then again, there is this one guy who just blows everybody away. And I go, so what? He does it in 8 days? No reaction. 7 days, 6 days, 5 days, 4 days, 3 days, 1 day. He does it in less than 1 day. I said, what's going on? And he goes, 8 hours. And I go, what? 8 hours? I go, how is that possible? He says he does it in a spandex. I said, what do you mean? And he was telling me that this guy lives next to a hill that's half a mile high. And somehow when he was young, he got it in his head to put a big log like Rocky did, when he was fighting Ivan Drago, a big tree trunk in the neck. And he would start jumping squat the hill up. And of course, in the beginning, you're off at 20 jumps, but that became 30, that became 40, and that became the whole hill. And this guy runs up the hill in 8 hours that these elite special forces do in 9 days. You see, you can only imagine. I mean, it's unbelievable. Think about this. think about that. You're on day 7. You're camping, after a hard day of climbing. You're making your porridge, and this guy in a spandex comes running by. He runs up the hill. You go like, what the heck is going on here? But you see, that's people for you, man. I'm going to meet today a guy that I wanted to meet for a long time, and finally he's here. And actually, one of those guys from the Elite Special Forces set me up with him, Stig Severinsen. Stig Severinsen, I believe he's from Sweden or from Denmark. This guy's the world record holding breath, 22 minutes. But the things that he does else as well, like he goes on the ice. Let's say he's in Alaska. He's sitting on the ice, 2 feet thick ice. He's in his Speedos. He's meditating to get himself warm and prepare for something that he's going to do. And what is he going to do? They cut a hole in the ice while he's meditating, and then 100 meters away, they cut another hole in the ice. He jumps in this hole, swims under the ice, and he comes out on the other hole. So he's going to have to find that hole. Imagine this. He's going to have to find 100 meters underwater. If he can't find the hole, he dies, because he takes it on one single breath. Then he comes out of there, and now you would think he's freezing, but then he sits on the ice in his Speedos, and he's meditating himself warm again. I mean, and I'm going to meet that guy today. I'm going to give him the O2 trainer, actually, because I think he really is going to enjoy it.
Wow. It sounds like Wim Hof. Wim Hof did a similar thing. But I mean, obviously, I'm sure they're very different. But I've seen Wim's, but Wim almost didn't make it to the hole. He said his retina froze up and he was basically blind under the water and almost died doing it. But again, he can sit there and, control his immune system, which is fascinating to me. And I hope I can get him on one day.
Wim Hof, man, he's a crazy Dutch guy. I hear it all the time, and I love that guy. I mean, this is a guy who they put him in ice, and then he can meditate his core temperature going up. I go like, how is that even possible?
Yeah.
When you're packed in ice? Yeah, the Iceman, unbelievable.
It is. Well, before we talk about the O2 trainer, very quickly, being a fellow European, I'm from England originally. Are there any things that you love about the way life is in Holland, whether it's the way the government does healthcare, drugs, anything like that you wish that we would do here in the US?
Healthcare is really good. Yes, in Holland, I think that would be a good thing to do here. And for the rest, I wouldn't say anything because the taxes are so insanely high. The cars are so expensive. The gas is so expensive. Everything is so expensive. If you make over 100,000 euros in Holland, you're going to have to pay 60% taxes. That's a big cut on the payday, So for the rest, I love the people interacting. I love the fact that everybody goes hand in hand pretty much together there. When I came to America, it was a culture shock to me, like the black and white thing. Because we don't have that in Holland. Well, we make black jokes and they make white jokes, and we do it where they are. That's generally accepted. Everybody's laughing. They are laughing with black jokes. We're laughing when they crack white jokes. It's like, so when I came here and I realized that's the complete opposite here, I was like, whoa, that's pretty gnarly, So that I wish that people would get along a little easier here in America, and especially between races. I think that's a big problem.
Yeah, I agree. I remember observing the same thing, and I think the best example to me is the South Park mentality. Like they make fun of everyone on that show. You know what I mean? So as long as everyone's laughing at each other, then no one should get butthurt about it. But it's when people laugh until you make fun of their group, and then they take exception to it, then that changes everything.
That's it. Exactly it. We had really big laughs when they would crack a white joke, and the other way around. And we're all sitting together. Everybody's having a really great time. And there is no animosity whatsoever. Not a hidden animosity like, oh, maybe he's inside. No, it's simply not there. So, yeah, that was weird.
Brilliant. Yeah. Well, thank you. I'm always intrigued about different perspectives being from out the country myself, because I think that, we are a great country, as are many others around the world. But I think one of the most intelligent things any country can do is look around the planet, see where other nations are doing something better and going, oh, maybe we should try that and bring it into ours.
Yeah, we should. But unfortunately, people are knuckleheads. I always go with racism. I think you're a dumb person if you're a racist. That's what I always say. Something is missing in the head. I don't see it. I mean, we're all skin and blood. Let's just keep it like that. We're all related, actually, also. So let it go, guys.
Amen to that. All right. Well, let's talk about the O2 trainer then, because as we said before, I had Dr. Belissa on the show. The breathing is very important to first responders in general with our overall health, and certainly with the stress mitigation, be able to stay calm and stay in that zone. But for firefighters specifically, we have the air pack on our back, so we only have a finite amount of air. So the more efficient we are with our emotions and with our breathing, the higher chance there is of us making a rescue or us actually getting back out of the fire safely. So how did you get into the study of breath, and then ultimately how did you develop the O2 trainer?
Well, it came from my weakness, from my asthma. I would when I would restart my track and field after laying in bed for 8 days having an asthma attack, then suddenly I would always break my running times, also on the 1500 meters. And it blew. I had no clue how that was possible. I blamed it in the beginning to the medication. I thought maybe it would open my lungs more, the heavy medication I was taking in between. And then I spent a lot of time at the doctors. They teach you how to breathe every month, go to breathing classes and doing all that stuff. And I never paid attention, but this time I paid attention to a pair of lungs it was a drawing on the wall in a poster. And it showed what a lung infection was. And as a kid, as a child, you think that a lung infection is in your lungs, but it's not. It's in the bronchial pipes, the airways that go toward the lungs. And they showed on the poster, they showed an infected air pipe, and they showed an healthy one next to each other. And that was it. I was 14 years old. I remember seeing that, and I go, oh, no, I got it. I've been working out my lungs for 8 days straight. I've been pulling air in through an infected area. Very hard for me to pull air in. So I made my breathing in part, which I didn't know the word inspiratory training, but I didn't know that at the time. My breathing in part, it's now much stronger. And then when the infection is gone, since it's stronger, I can pull more air in, and that's why I can run faster and better. So why don't I come up with something that controls the air intake? That was my thought. And I started experimenting. Like, for instance, we would go on a holiday to France. And in France, they had coins at the time. This was before the euro. The French coins had like holes in them. So I would put a coin in front of my teeth, and I would raise my lip a little bit, and I tried to force to breathe in through the little tiny hole, and then breathe out, through the rest, which is a very hard thing because you're going to open your mouth. And, if that goes wrong and you breathe the coin in and it goes in your lungs, well, you're dead. There's nothing they can do. So I go, man, I got to come up with something that controls the air intake. That was always in my head. And at every party where I went, there's always somebody who talks about his invention, right? And then I said, well, I actually have a good idea. So I would say, we would call it the Ruttenizer. That was the first name for the O2 trainer. And then there was this time that Vanderlei Silva, he was teaching the Ultimate Fighter. And he was training those guys with snorkels. Apparently swimmers do that as well. They breathe carbon dioxide also. They rebreathe it, so they're breathing through their snorkel in and out, and they do it for certain sessions. And that night, my phone went nuts. My text went nuts, and we're all friends. We say, hey, dude, that Ruttenizer, you're going to make that thing. You have to make that thing because, look, it's not what you're doing, but somebody's going to come up with it, and somebody's going to do it. So you better start doing it. And I go, okay. So I start doing a patent search, and I realized there was no patent for it. Everybody had a device that controlled the air out with resistance and the air in with resistance. But I knew that air out with resistance is wrong, because if you do that, you cannot really empty your lungs. There's always, especially if you're struggling, you need air before you can completely exhale. So there's always air left in the lungs. That's what I thought. But if you can completely empty your lungs, you can use your entire inspiratory system to breathe in again. So I start making it. I made a prototype. I start training with the prototype. 3 weeks later, and this is crazy, I carried my inhaler everywhere in my life where I went. Every fight in the dressing room, I had to open my lungs because it's exercise induced, and every asthma patient has this. If they take a 50-yard sprint, they will be good for about 2 minutes, and boom, the lungs are closing. If you sneeze really violently, you have to sneeze 3 times in a row, your lungs will close, and you have to open them up. So if you don't have an inhaler with you when you travel, your lungs are closed now. It's going to take a while, like an hour and a half, to open it up again. It's a nightmare. So I always needed to carry an inhaler with me. And that was completely gone after 3 weeks. So I sent it to my friend in Holland who also has asthma. And he called me back in 8 days. And he says, dude, my asthma is gone. I want to sell them in Europe. So he starts selling them in Europe. Then we start training with it and more people. And now we got all these reviews from other people saying, hey, my asthma is 90% gone or it's completely gone. I mean, everybody had the same thing. So I thought, okay, if it works like this for sick people, for sick lungs, what is it going to do for healthy lungs? Now, you just talked about Belisa Vranic, world-renowned breathing expert. And I met her the first time. A friend of ours set us up in her office on the Fifth Avenue in New York. I was shooting a TV show there, so I came by. And the first thing that she did was taking a meter out. She was going to measure my chest. And then I had to breathe in, and she was going to measure the difference between it. And right away I realized, okay, because the more you can expand your chest, the more air you can pull in your lungs, because that's how your lungs work. A lot of people think that your lungs breathe by itself. It's not. It's your body doing it for you. There's a vacuum between the lungs and the body. And if I expand my chest, that's how you actually open your lungs. So the more you can expand your chest, the more air you can pull in your lungs. And she freaked out. She's looking at me and she goes, nah, she does it again. Do it again. And then she does it again. She runs out the office. And she comes back with the doctor. And I go, what's going on? I said, it's either really bad or really good, right? And she goes, if I wouldn't bring this doctor, he would never believe me. I said, what do you mean? What's going on? And she said, well, normally when a person walks in and we measure and he breaks the record that they have there on file, they break it with like a quarter inch or less than a quarter inch. You just broke the record with more than 2 inches. How is that possible? And then we start talking about it and we realize it's from the O2 trainer, because you're breathing in with resistance. You're doing breathing exercises with it. And what happens is you're using the outside muscles of your body to do that. Muscles that you never use because you never breathe like that. But you feel it. If you do 4 minutes with my O2 trainer, it takes only 4 minutes a day. Well, actually, I do it in 3 minutes and 20 seconds now. You do 30 repetitions in the morning. And that's it. That's the only thing you need to do. And it cures you from your asthma. It gives you bigger lungs, and it makes your chest expand more, so you can pull more air in there. So once we realized that, I go, oh, now we got some gold going here. So then there was this really bad review over in the competition. There's a competition. I won't mention his name, but there's a competition of mine that somebody wrote a really bad review about. And my manager called me and he says, hey, did you read the review? I said, about what? Yeah, about that product. I said, no, I didn't read it, but I can tell you it's bad, right, the review. And he said, how do you know? I said, because it's stupid to breathe, to control the air in and out with resistance. It's just not right. I said, do me a favor, find that guy who wrote it, because obviously he's a scientist, and tell him I want to send him an O2 trainer. And my manager goes, are you sure you want to do that? I mean, what if it's a bad result? I go, dude, we're curing asthma right now. What do you think? It's going to be fine. Trust me. So he calls the guy picks up, and he says, hey, I'm representing Bas Rutten. And the guy said, oh, the O2 trainer. We're already using that. First thing he said. Now, this guy trains Usain Bolt, 3 other gold medalists from the last Olympics in Brazil, and a silver medalist. And he came to me. I used to train with my O2 trainer. And he says, no, you don't need to do that. What Usain Bolt is doing, he's just doing breathing exercises in the morning. You do 30 repetitions. That's it. He says, now, if you have a competition going, if you're 6 weeks out, you have to do it twice a day. If you do it twice a day, after doing that for 6 weeks, you can maintain this by doing it once a day. You take care of all the lactic acid in your core. And I go, what does that do? He says, well, that's the reason people get tired, Bas. You know, especially in martial arts, you know, when you get hit in the gut a few times or when you do sprawl a few times, you're working your core muscles. Well, your core muscles start pumping up with lactic acid, right? And if they get tight and they get thicker, well, they don't only go thicker to the front, they also go thicker to the back, inside the body. So now it means that inside your body, your lungs, they have a smaller compartment to breathe because the muscles are closing in, so to say. He says, if you do this 6 weeks, 2 times a day, you'll take care of that problem. They don't blow up anymore. He says, Bas, that is the biggest thing in any, endurance sport that people, because if you start breathing really heavy and really fast, you also start contracting your core muscles, of course, because you're breathing with your core, they start filling up with lactic acid. Once that lactic acid is gone, well, you can use EPO. That won't have an effect as much as you're doing this with the auto trainer. So now suddenly I had this crazy guy with I think it's 158 IQ. I mean, he got a higher IQ than Einstein had, I believe, and who's training all these elite athletes who was doing inspiratory training. I go, but this is a match made in heaven. He had 12 published medical journals to back every data up. So now I got all these medical journals suddenly that are backing up everything that I've been saying for the last 6 years. So that was a match made in heaven. And now people start realizing it. They start doing it. Like on my websites, I have 100% success with asthma, for instance. Can I medically claim it? No, I cannot do that yet, because I'm talking now to a guy from the FDA. I want to make it into a medical device since it helps everybody. And he builds these pulmonology machines where they can breathe, how much people can pull in, pull out. They measure the lungs, they measure everything. And what he's going to do now, when he delivers a big machine like that to like a hospital, he's going to give him a few boxes of auto trainers, where they're going to give them to their patients. They're first going to test them before they use the auto trainer. And then 4 weeks later, they're going to retest them again. And I'm knowing 100%, I'm not hoping, I know 100%, those results are going to be freaky. So once I have that, then I'm going to have medical science backing up my asthma claim. And if that happens, then I hope it becomes a medical device, and then we can cure people without any medication.
That is incredible. Well, firstly, my little boy has had asthma and eczema since he was an infant, and nothing seemed to be working. And then recently I actually started taking CBD and gave him CBD every day. That has had a big effect. But even so, I mean, like you said, there's years of that weak respiratory system because of the asthma that he's always had, and always afraid to laugh, to run too fast. So I'm intrigued to try it for my son and myself, because I mean, for me, I've never had an issue, but it's the performance, like how much more efficient can I be as an athlete as well. But everything that you're saying makes perfect sense. And I know that, I'm sure you're more than aware of this. There's devices out there that have been labeled as altitude training. I saw someone just the other day post they were doing that. I'm like, unless you're standing in Colorado on the top of the ski slope, it's probably not altitude training. But the expiration versus inspiration resistance, to me, makes perfect sense. We're trying to use all those breathing muscles to create that strong vacuum so we can draw that air in. And then after that, it doesn't make sense to have a huge resistance to push the air out. Wow.
So first of all, you have how old is your son?
He's 11.
And so he's got, is the eczema bad as well? Like when I had to get into bandages every single night, my hands were really bad, everywhere. If I would make a fist, it would burst and crap would come out. It was really disgusting. I hope he doesn't have it like that.
It's not that severe, no. And even his bronchospasms, his wheezing, it wouldn't be too much to calm it back down again. So he didn't have to have the daily steroid treatment, thank God. But the steroid cream definitely would work on his eczema. But it would be easily triggered. So if you lay on one of those styrofoam, like bodyboard, surfboards, he'd come back and his whole chest would be covered, So a small insult to the body would cause either wheezing or eczema.
And I hear a dog at your place. Does he have a problem with the dog, petting the dog, and then it fires his eczema up or his asthma?
It doesn't make it worse. No, it's a German Shepherd. But I know dairy was a big trigger for him. So I think it's more of a food-based allergy.
Yeah, dairy and pork meat also. Watch out for that as well. Any eggs, dairy. My whole house, or our whole house, was all plastic curtains. There was no, the floors were wood or stone. There's no carpets, no nothing, and dogs. I would be in a room with a dog for 15 minutes, and then I would, the next day, it's an asthma attack for 8 days. Immediately would fire that. If I would pet a dog, and then I would scratch me, that's it. The whole eczema would start flaring up. So with animals, it was a big thing. That's why I asked.
Yeah. No. Now, were you raised with animals since you were a baby, or were there no animals in the house, so then they triggered you when you saw them?
Yeah, no animals in the house whatsoever. But, that's how you can see I loved animals, because my favorite uncle and aunt, they had these two little dachshunds, like long hair. They were Afke and Boukje. They were the names, and I loved those dogs. And I always wanted to sleep there, but I knew that I could only sleep one night there, and play with the dogs. And then the next day, it was 8 days in bed with an asthma attack. But I still wanted to do it because I really liked those dogs. So, but at home, no, we didn't ever had it. I had birds like crows and stuff like that. But they were sitting outside, of course.
Right. Yeah. And then it's heartbreaking. Like you said, seeing a child that's not able to be around an animal or, can't play for too long because they'll start wheezing, it's really horrible to see. So the fact that this is one of the tools to help that is incredible. So I'm going to get one for myself. This sounds absolutely amazing.
Yeah. You're just, you live in California now, right?
In Florida.
Florida. Oh, yeah, I'll send you one. So you just send me an address, and I'll get you one.
Oh, that's incredible! Thank you so much.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Well, let's talk about how other people can. So people listening right now, I'm sure they are intrigued as well. How can they get hold of one of these?
o2trainer.com. And otherwise just Google O2 Trainer. And just go there, and then you will see on the front page there are some tests out there also, some published medical journals I put there on as well. You will see the breathing exercise. It's a weird way to breathe. Like you have to breathe out while you lean over, and you sit on a chair, and you breathe completely out. You press the O2 Trainer against your mouth, and then you inhale with explosive power. And you try to time it that the end of your breathing in part, so to say, is exactly when you're sitting up straight. So it takes a little bit of work in the beginning so you can time it. But once you time it perfectly and really focus, at the moment you go upwards, you have to press your belly out. Just that you have to really breathe through your core. And once you start focusing on that, you realize also that you're helping a lot of people. I don't know if you know, but there's I would say, at least 70% of the people have no clue how to breathe. If you tell them take a deep breath, they raise their shoulders, right? That's completely wrong. That's the worst thing you can do. So if you have problems with running and with that, well, that's the reason you breathe the wrong way. Now the O2 Trainer, when you do breathing exercises with it, well, guess what? You cannot pull the air in by raising your shoulders. You're going to be forced to use your core. So I had this review from a guy from SWAT. And he wrote a review and he said, I was training with the O2 Trainer the day before. The next day, I'm running without the O2 Trainer, and I just blasted my own record away. And he says, I know this doesn't make any sense because I just trained one time with the O2 Trainer. He said, but then I realized I was breathing wrong. The O2 Trainer actually sparked me to breathe through my core. And that's when he ran the next day, he just destroyed his old time by just breathing the correct way. So that's another great thing that comes with the O2 Trainer. We'll teach you how to breathe the correct way unknowingly. You just pull the air in and you will automatically be taught how to breathe.
Yeah. And I tell you, I've found this with the few things that I found work really well is that they're always so simple and they always work very, very quickly. And you mentioned about the scientific proof of asthma is we're so set on science. And I get that from a safety point of view from certain areas. But it's also frustrating when you see some things that they work and you see they're working with pretty much everyone, but they still have to go down this route of, well, you need to prove it in a lab and double blind studies and this and that. It's like, okay, well, you can go down that route, but in the meantime, I'm going to use this because I know it works.
That's it. It's $50, dude. You can't go wrong with it. And it will help. Just read the reviews. People in the we had 120 reviews it started with. And people freaking out. The sax player from the Eagles even commented longer, stronger notes. I mean, weird things. SAS, the Special Air Forces Service. That's the only team I never trained in. Not the only. I didn't train the Mossad either. But I mean, I was always very intrigued with the SAS because these guys are such badasses. And I had a freaking review from an SAS guy, and I was so happy to have their review and that it helped for them as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, and you reminded me of something else as well. I don't know if this is law enforcement as well, but certainly fire. We do a spirometry test every year as part of our medical where you're doing that fast exhale and they're measuring your lung capacity. So being able to do well on that is also preserving, the ability to do your job, because I'm sure if you constantly aren't able to do that anymore, that's going to affect your ability to stay as a frontline firefighter.
Oh man, I can't wait till you do the test again after training a month with this thing.
Yeah, well, I did it not just a few months ago, and I'm due to redo it. So I will absolutely let you know what it looks like. Hopefully, I'll use the same company, so they'll have last year's records as well, and we'll compare them side by side.
So this is what happened with me. I was in Hawaii in May last year, and I said to my wife, you know what? I'm going to make a special Facebook. It's like an O2 boot camp, Bas Rutten's O2 boot camp. It's a private Facebook. You can apply if you can send a request, and then I'll check you out and I okay you. And all these people who bought O2 trainers are on there, like 2,500 people now on there. Oh, gee, what do I want to say? Oh, yeah. So I started with screen 11. All these screens, they start with number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it increases every time. It decreases the size hole. So the higher the number, the harder it is to pull air, the more resistance you have. And I'm on screen 11, and I did that for 8 months. Now, I remember I did my 30 repetitions. I timed it, and I did my 30 repetitions in 3 minutes and 55 seconds. That was in May. Now, 3 weeks ago or 2 weeks ago, I decided, you know what, I should time it again to see where I am. Because if I go under 3 minutes, I should go to number 12. I did it in 2 minutes and 45 seconds, like a minute and 10 seconds faster than I did before. I go, whoa, that is a huge difference. So then you can see how much stronger your inspiratory system became. Now I went to screen 12, which I already do in 3 minutes and 20 seconds. Also way faster with a higher number screen than I started with the 11. So that's a great way for you to do your 30 repetitions, time it, see how long it takes to do the 30 repetitions, and then a month later, you time it again. And then you will find out that you decreased your time tremendously, and that means your inspiratory system is much stronger now.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited. I can't wait to try it. So thank you so much for that. So I'm gonna transition to some closing questions so we can let you go. You've been so generous with your time already. The first question I always like to ask people, is there a book that you love to recommend to people? It can be about what we've discussed or something completely different.
2 books really hit me. One book is The Alchemist from Paulo Coelho. That's a book that people should really look into it. I just told my buddy Chris Weidman to, because he's going to go to Prague today, I believe, for the UFC. And I told him, get that book, dude. You read it in 4 hours. It's a book about a sheep herder that goes to find his personal legend. You go, hey, what is this? Is this the book Bas was talking about? This is just a story. But once you start reading the story, this guy found these amazing ways to retrain your mind and to start paying attention to things. It's a book that is translated in next to the Bible, the most translated book in the world. Over 70 million copies they sold. So there's a reason for that. And I highly suggest everybody to read that book. And then Matthew McConaughey, he was talking on the Actors Studio, that's the show here, right, when they interview him. And I'm always been a big fan of his. And he was talking about the greatest salesman in the world's greatest salesman, actually, by Og Mandino, I believe it is. And that book, but it takes you 10 months to read. And it's not a thick book. It's a thin book, actually. But what happens is, this is a guy who's the greatest salesman in the world, and he needs an apprentice because he's getting older, and he's looking for this young kid that he thinks could be the next greatest salesman in the world. And he finds this one kid, and he gives him these scrolls. And he gives him 10 scrolls. And those 10 scrolls, he has to start with scroll number 1. He has to read it in the morning. Takes about 5 minutes to read. And then in the middle of the day, you find another spot where you, maybe before or after lunch, whatever you do, but a quiet spot, you read it again. And then just before you go to sleep, the last thing you do, you read it again. So 3 times a day, you read it for about 4 or 5 minutes. That's what it takes. But you do that for 30 days straight. And what I realized real soon, that was that within 15, 20 days, you memorize the whole thing. You don't even have to look anymore. You pretty much is locked into your mind. So it retrains your brain. It's like, for instance, episode, I don't know scroll one more, but it goes about habits. Habits is a big thing with me. The habits, training habits, bad habits, good habits, everything in fighting, everything in life is about habits. And all the things that he says, a bunch of them, but you preach them, but you don't do them. You realize, wait a minute, yeah, I know this, but I never do this. So once you start retraining your mind for 30 days, then you go to the next scroll. You read the next few pages of the book, and then you wrap the book up after 10 months when you're done. But now you got a world of knowledge in your mind because you just rewired your mind 3 times a day for a month straight on every subject. It's a really cool book, and it worked really well for me.
Excellent. I don't think I've had either of those 2 recommended, so I will definitely put them on my list, and I'm interested to see how they play out in my mind too, because that monkey brain, I think we're all, like you're saying, with the 90-day detox, I think it is there's so much white noise out there, and I think it takes an act of what's the right word? I'm blanking on the word now, but anyway, it takes effort to create that discipline. That's the word I'm looking for. It takes discipline to actually create those good habits again, because there's so many distractions out there.
Listen, I'm like we were talking about the Exodus 90. That's what they call it. I'm a very devout Catholic. I spend a lot of time on that stuff. And Exodus 90 is when they went to the desert. Exodus, when they left the Pharaoh, Egypt, and when the Israelis got free. So every day when you read a part of that story. So it follows you on that story. But then the things you cannot do, because a lot of these things, what you already mentioned, we are addicted to a lot of stuff that we don't know of. Like TV, movies, sports, anything you have. So what this is, it will detach you from everything. So I give you a list here. I just looked it up. I got it on my phone. Okay, it starts like this. You take short, cold showers. So you can't shower warm for 90 days. You practice regular, intense exercise. I checked that. That's an easy. Full night's sleep. That's an easy one too. Abstain from alcohol. Abstain from desserts and sweets. Abstain from eating between meals. Abstain from soda or sweet drinks. Only white milk or unsweetened tea are permissible. Abstain from television, movies, or televised sports. Abstain from video games. Abstain from non-essential material purchases. Only listen to music that lifts the soul. Only use the computer for work, school, or essential tasks like paying bills, stuff like that. Only use mobile devices for essential communications. So non-essential texting, app, and internet use is prohibited. And then you have 2 fasting days as well on Wednesday and Fridays. But that's, where you eat no meat and where you have one big meal and then the other 2 meals they cannot be larger than that one meal together, But doing all these things, and we're in day 20 right now. We're doing this with a group of guys, with 10 other guys. You create so much space. It is so crazy, because now all the time that I would sit in front of the TV, or like I just did this interview, I would say, oh, let's watch a movie. I go back to my computer. I start preparing for a show. And then I do that for 2.5 hours. I watch a 30-minute TV show, whatever. I go back to the computer. But every time, it's the TV is in between. Now suddenly that's cut out. So what do I do now? Oh, now I'm going to have to read. Okay, so what do I want to read? Oh, I always want to know a thing about this or about that. Well, those are the books I'm reading right now. You see, so you're freeing up so much time. You're detaching from all the stupid likes and all the watching the videos and surfing the internet and looking at stupid stuff. Suddenly, you have a lot of free time. And you go, man, I should have done this way before. We all are saying this already. And trust me, we're already only 20 days in. So we got still 70 days to go. It's a lot. But everybody is already seeing the fruits of it. And it's so much more openness, like memorizing. I memorize every day to train my mind. I take this certain piece that I do. I memorize every day. I remember a large part of text. Normally it would take 20 minutes. Now it's like literally 6-7 minutes. Boom, I got it locked in. I go, wow, how is that even possible? But it's because you're creating so much free time in your head right now, that you're unloading all the unnecessary stuff. Your mind works much better. So we're all loving it right now. I can only wait what it's going to do in 90 days. And I truly believe that a lot of us will just keep on going. I don't think a lot of things I will put back anymore. Yeah, sure. You'll see me post a picture or a photo about work, like McGregor was in our gym. That's a job thing for me, because I'm still working in mixed martial arts. I still work, so I'm allowed to do that. Or putting up a training video, I can do that as well. But all the other posts for the last 3 weeks, you haven't seen me do anymore, because I have way more free time right now.
Yeah, that sounds like a brilliant idea. It really does. And I'm interested to hear what happens at day 90 if you do carry on pushing through, because I know as we talked before, alcohol is one I've struggled to take in and out. And every time I have the first drink after whatever time, there's that little voice in my head saying, well, why do we even do that? It's just that habit and being weak and allowing that poor habit to drop back in. So,
yeah, the worst part is when people, they come to me and these are the heavy drinkers, and they go, yeah, but how do you have fun, Bas? I say, oh man, how do I have fun without alcohol? Yeah. I say, I feel so sad for you. And they go, what do you mean? I said, your whole, when you grew up as a kid, you had a horrible life, right? And he goes, no, I didn't have a horrible life. Oh, so you started drinking when you were 4 years old? And he goes, no. I said, oh, well, wait a minute. But you just said that how can I have pleasure without alcohol? Your whole childhood, you had a great childhood, right? Well, you didn't drink. So you just you're telling yourself that you only can have fun with drinking. It's just your mind doing that. You have way more fun without the drinking. And trust me, the next day, even way more, because now you're walking. Now I wake up I wake up early every day anyway, like 5:15 I wake up because I like to do a lot of stuff. But if I have to travel now and I walk through an airport at 6 a.m. in the morning, I go, dude, that's quite a difference with 10 years ago when I was a heavy drinker. Now I don't have anything. I'm feeling great. It is so much, but that's the problem with people. They literally think that alcohol is the reason they have fun. And I go, dude, it's a very sad thing what you just said. Because it's not like that. They blame it on the alcohol or blame it on the drugs that they're having fun. It's pretty pathetic.
Yeah. No, it is. And I think we just find ourselves slipping in that way. And it takes a fast or some god awful tragedy to make you go, wait a second. I used to be, like you said, drink once a week even, but now here I am, habitually drinking, and how did I get to this point? So yeah, great stuff to take away from that as well. Well, you mentioned, not watching TV at the moment, but when you do, or when you did, what was your favorite movie and or documentary that you loved?
One of the funniest comedies on the planet is Tropic Thunder. That's a movie that still gets me if I see that. Super hilarious. And then on TV, I have a SEAL team. That's the thing that I do with my wife, which I'm allowed on Sunday if I want, but they just canceled the show, or not canceled the show. They're on break. So because otherwise I told her, I said, listen, I cannot watch TV with you anymore, but we can do it on Sunday. We record it and then we watch the show on Sunday. On Sunday, I can have one thing from that whole list that I say, okay, if I want to have a glass of wine or something, then I can do that on Sunday. Or if I say, okay, I want to watch one show on TV, I can do that on Sunday. So SEAL Team, I like that show. I like America's Got Talent, believe it or not. I think that's one of the coolest shows to see people do things that just blows your mind. And I always start, it's really weird. I'm not crying, but my right eye always starts leaking. And my wife looks at me, I say, I'm not crying, trust me. It's when I see talent like that, it really gets to me. The things that I could never do. And there's a lot of people who can do so many crazy stuff. And then, my wife doesn't like this show, but I like The Walking Dead. I fear The Walking Dead. I started binge watching that in the beginning when I was shooting the movie Mall Cop, because I had a lot of free time. And that's when I watched the first episode of Walking Dead, and that pulled me in. And now I'm the whole season. Now, of course, I'm everywhere. And everybody goes, yeah, but it's about zombies. It's not about zombies. It's about what people are going to do when the world goes down the drain. And that's some pretty gnarly stuff, and it's pretty interesting to see how people can change, become murderers, become whatever they become, and who steps up and who becomes a hero. And that's what that show is about. And once you're in it, it's very hard to let go. And especially also Fear the Walking Dead. Shows like that I like a lot.
Brilliant. And then what about a documentary? Are there any documentaries you've seen that you've loved?
The last documentary I watched, what was it? It was about DMT, the spirit molecule. I don't know if you ever did DMT. It's the most psychoactive drug there is. Teachers, Harvard professors, they truly believe it's not. You're literally connected to a parallel universe. It's like, as soon as you inhale it, it's a smoke thing that you do. There's no side effects, no nothing. You can do your homework. Scientists, this has been so much well documented. As soon as you close your eyes, it's like you opened your eyes on the other side, and it's boom, and it's an experience that you cannot. Like, I came home and I told my wife 4 days in a row. She said, you got to stop talking now about it, because you can give yourself an assignment. For instance, I wanted to talk to God. I wanted to see how he's able to control everything here on the planet. And dude, it took me to the side. It was I was okay. The first time I said, okay, I want to talk to God. So I'm shooting away from Earth. As soon as I close my eye, I see the Earth going slow, smaller. Now I'm in space. And I'm in space and I'm flying. I go, okay, let's see if I can go warp speed. And I go warp speed. And by the way, this is 5 minutes. It looks like it's 30 minutes, but it's literally 4 or 5 minutes. So it's not a thing. If you don't like it, you open your eyes, you're out of it. So it's nothing crazy. Joe Rogan actually talked a lot about it, and that's how he got me inspired. So I tried it, and then I shot up into Earth, in heaven. I'm flying warp speed, and suddenly I stop and there's this giant black hole, right? And I see things going in there, buses and trees. It's really weird to go in there, but something tells me that I have to go in there. Somehow I have to go in there. So at the moment I wanted to fly over to go in that wormhole, suddenly somebody in the room touched my leg and I snapped out of it. So immediately, if you're distracted, boom, you're out of it. And I couldn't go back anymore. And I go, oh man, I really wanted, because I had to go in there. There was a reason why I had to go in there, and I wanted to know. Anyway, I come home and I figured, I'm going to Google about DMT. And I'm seeing this link that pops up at the top, and it says that this professor at Harvard or whatever it was, he wrote a thing about it that you connect to a parallel universe. So I click on it, and boom, my mind was blown. You saw the Earth, and then you saw a parallel universe, and guess what was in between? It was a wormhole. And I go, no way. I freaking saw that wormhole. Now, if I would have known this before I did it, I can understand I thought it, but I literally saw what he was talking about. So everybody apparently sees the same things. And there's a reason that we see the same thing. So I watched the documentary. Joe Rogan is in that documentary, the Spirit Molecule, and it's pretty freaking interesting.
Brilliant. I'll have to watch that. I haven't done DMT specifically, but I had a gentleman on the show who uses a part of what's in ecstasy and psilocybin for psychotherapy. So you go into the office, you have the same experience you were talking about, but they're also leading you through psychotherapy. So people that do have PTSD and some of these other issues, they're able to get them to actually go down and face those awful things that have been troubling them for so long that they just aren't able to do in a normal therapy session. And they've had incredible results by doing that.
I think everything is there. If you believe that this is just it, this life, and then after we're all dead and nothing happens, I think you're the dumb person. Like every scientist says, oh, we came from one cell and then everything came from the one cell. I said, well, you got to admit that's a very intelligent cell then, right? And if we talk intelligence, well, then we're back to God again. So there is way more going on. I truly believe this life is just our test. And if we do this test right, we're going up there. There's a spirit world out there. We all know this. I had a spirit in my house. I had a ghost attacking me. I saw a curtain flying up against the ceiling that hung in front of a window or in front of a door instead of a door in the doorpost. And I thought somebody was in the house. I was trying to trick that person because I was a third person I thought was in the house. So I acted like I was walking one way, and suddenly I made a U-turn and I started sprinting. And what do you know? When I went through this one room where the curtain hung, the curtain flew up against the ceiling. So somebody just ran through it, right? So it was acknowledged somebody was in the house. Yet there was nobody in the house. And yes, all doors were closed. There was no freaking storm, a storm going on outside that could blow the curtain up. It was the wildest thing. I also been attacked by a ghost. Also, at least 6 times, I think. Very scary thing in my bed while I was asleep. And every time when I came out, I challenged it. I said, do it again now. Every time you're doing it, but I don't expect it. But I would like you to try this one more time. And then, of course, it would never happen again until I got sick of it. And I just challenged it at the spot where the curtain flew up. There was always cold there. And we realized there was a woman in the house that passed away, the previous owner. And my kids, they could describe exactly what she looked like. Everybody saw her. She wasn't affecting anybody, but she was attacking me. Now, looking back on this, I was a heavy drinker at the time. And I'm a happy drunk, man. With us is, if I'm drunk, the music is on, there's party in the house, we're dancing. But, being a stupid dancer and going to the house is still not being a good father or husband, So I had to stop that. And I think that she didn't like me to drink at the time. I think that's why she was attacking me. But it was a very scary experience, and that all led up to me jumping back into the faith and realizing where we all came from.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, like you said, it is very hard to fathom that we just came out of absolutely nothing at all. And I'm of a spiritual side as well. I think that evolution and some of those things most likely did happen, but then again, something was created initially. So yeah. And I think it's kind of arrogant for us to think that we're the only life form in this whole universe and there's nothing after this. So, but I mean, it's everyone's personal journey, but I'm looking forward. I think I'm going to try DMT one day. There's no doubt in my mind, and try and have that experience and trying to learn more about my inner space, as they say.
Get ready for it, man. It's something.
I'll have the O2 trainer in my mouth so I don't hyperventilate. All right. So then one of the last ones, is there a person that you would recommend to come on this podcast to talk to the first responders and military of the world?
Oof. No, I don't have like a Nick Newell, like that kind of guy who I'm just talking about with a congenital amputee and then doing things like he did. That's always a perfect story. And for the rest, who would I? It doesn't pop up at the top of my head, but if something pops up in a little bit, I will definitely let you know.
Brilliant. All right. So then the very last thing we'll talk about before we talk about where we can find you, if you want to reach out or see you on social media, what do you do to decompress? What's your outlet these days?
Well, that's my praying. That's my meditation. That's my relaxation. That's how I start in the morning. Listen, when I get you so 10 o'clock, let's say our interview started, I did all my prayers. I already did the mass. I already did half an hour meditation. I already went hiking on a hill, and now it's only 10 o'clock in the morning. I did everything I wanted to do. Another time, just when I don't hike, I work out. So then at 10 o'clock, that's when I turn on my social media. That's when I turn on my phone. I'm completely cut off before that because there's nothing that can happen that, if somebody died, well, he's dead. He's not going to be alive. In an hour, he's still dead. So don't worry about that. So I completely am. And I used to do that already before the 90 days. Trust me. I always did that, especially the last 2 or 3 years, because it gives me an enormous peace of mind. And I really got into meditation now also, because before I never did, which was weird because you would think, but now with the Exodus 90, you have to do it. And it starts with 20 minutes, but I'm already up to half an hour. I think this morning, actually, I did 40 minutes because I'm really enjoying it. It's like things that you don't like about yourself. You start working on that in your mind and how you can solve it. And once you shoot into that, the answers come, man, left and right. And it's so cool. And then you know how to deal. You get aggravated if somebody cuts you off. And boom, boom, boom. Well, you can actually meditate on that and prepare yourself for that and running scenarios through your head and watch slowly but surely. And then suddenly when you're on the freeway and somebody does, you go like, wow, that was weird. And then get angry, and it's because you were meditating. So I'm just in the early stages, just 20 days been doing it. But I think that's going to be easy an hour for me a day now, and maybe even longer at night, because it's whether I'm reading or doing something, I might as well meditate another half an hour, because you can fix a lot of stuff in meditation. So yeah, that's an unloading for me right now.
Brilliant. All right. So the very last thing then, where can people reach out to you and find not only the O2 trainer, but anything else that you've got out there at the moment?
Oh, well, Facebook, Bas Rutten. So it's facebook.com/Bas Rutten. And then on Instagram and Twitter, it's Bas Rutten MMA. But like I said, I'm next 70 days, you won't see a lot from me because I'm not on it. And for the last 3 weeks also. But sometimes, I will post a thing that is job related. And if I see a question there from somebody that really urges, that he wants me to give an answer, I will, of course, do that. And that's about it. So I'm not big on the social media right now, but it's coming back.
Perfect. All right. Well, I just want to say thank you. I mean, the path you've led us through from your early childhood to, the O2 trainer and all the other kind of tangents that we've been on has been an incredible interview. And I just really thank you for being so generous with your time and talking to the audience.
You're very welcome. I had a great time myself as well.